Good afternoon, students. So now we're in week 8 of our class. And so this week, all you have to do is just to write your week 8 rough draft. And so for the comparison contrast essay, all you have to do is compare and contrast two things and tell me which one is better than the other. So this week's lesson is going to be about week 8 worksheet and about how to use transition words in all of your papers, and as well as different ways of saying comparison contrast instead of just simply saying as a child or as an adult or something is better than or worse than something. And so you can use transition words to help with your essay flow and to give you more sentence variety and more variety in your writing. So I'm gonna, without further, and I hope that you all had a great Memorial Day weekend. And without further ado, happy summer. I'm going to start my lesson. So this will be, today's lesson is about the week 8. I can't believe we're already in week 8. That's 2 whole months already. Okay, here's an example of your week 8 assignment worksheet. So for your week 8 assignment, you can either hand in a worksheet or your rough draft. So either one is fine. So here under the working thesis. So your working thesis is your thesis statement, which is the main idea of your essay. So your thesis statement is the main point located as the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. So here you would write your thesis. Fruits are better than vegetables because of their cost, nutrition, and taste. So here you have a really good thesis statement because you have the what, the topic, fruits are better than vegetables, opinion. So that's the what part. Remember that when you have a thesis statement, you need to have the what and the why. The what is the topic and the opinion, and the why are the reasons for that opinion. Because whenever you make a claim in English, you have to have credible evidence. And so your credible evidence will be your reasons. So in this essay too, you're going to back up your reasons with APA. So for essay 2, you are required to have at least one APA source. So if you're going to write something like fruits are better than vegetables, like this example, then you could say the benefits of, you can look up Google, the benefits of fruits over vegetables. And then you'll get a whole bunch of reasons and statistics. And then you can use those statistics in as your in-text citation for your essay 2. So for your comparison contrast, so you have the 3 reasons, and then these 3 reasons line up with your supporting topic sentences. So if you're going to write about why fruits are better than vegetables, it's because of the fruit's low cost, better nutrition, and better taste. And so here the 3 subpoints you will discuss in your essay. In other words, your 3 body paragraphs are going to be cost, nutrition, and taste. And so the first body paragraph will talk about cost. Fruits are cheaper than vegetables. And then you give from here, you give examples such as apples, pears, and strawberries are all cheaper than you would give the cost from, and then you would give the cost from, say, a grocery store, and then you would use an APA to back that up. Taste. Fruits taste better than vegetables because fruits have natural sugars, and you can combine fruits with chocolate, and you can combine fruits with caramel. Body paragraph 3, nutrition. Fruits have more nutritional value than vegetables because fruits have vitamin C, fruits have antioxidants, and fruits have vitamin A. So nutrition. So here you have the 3 reasons as the cost, the taste, and the nutrition. And then you have your subpoints. These are known as subpoints. And this underlined thing that's known as the topic sentence. So every topic sentence has subpoints that match the topic sentence. And so that's how you know that you have essay coherence, is when you have your topic sentence and your 3 subpoints that match your topic sentence. And then each topic sentence matches the thesis statement, cost, nutrition, and taste. And so when you have a thesis statement with matching body paragraphs. That's how you know that you have essay coherence. And also when you have a thesis statement with matching body paragraphs, that's known as the 5-paragraph essay structure. So getting into the comparison contrast essay, some ways in which you could say, for example, a lot of people are saying, Mary is rich, but John is poor. And so the most common way everybody is using opposition is but, and so if there are many other ways to say but, so instead of saying but all the time, you could say in contrast to Mary's wealth, John is poor. So instead of just saying Mary is rich, but John is poor all the time, you could use in contrast to. You can say Mary is rich, however, John is poor. Or you could say, while Mary is rich, John is poor. So these are 3 other ways in which you can say but. So instead of but, you could use in contrast to, however, and while. So here are some more words, okay? What are transition words? What are conjunctive adverbs? And so transition words are actually conjunctive adverbs that describe describe what and where and to what extent an action or verb is done. Conjunctive adverbs, transition, they're the same thing. Conjunctive adverbs, transition words, different grammar books all have different names for the same thing. So transition words show addition, comparison, contrast, example, summary, and time sequence by linking sentences and paragraphs together. Adverbial conjunctions, which is the same thing as transition words, add depth and coherence to text. Oftentimes, they act as transitions to help guide a reader through a writer's idea, signaling a contrast or a comparison or supporting an idea. So whenever you use a transition word, you're telling the reader you're about to talk about something else. If I were to say, Mary is rich, however, and so as soon as I say the word however, the reader suddenly realizes, oh, there's going to be another idea coming up. So the however signals to the reader that a new idea is coming up. Or you're adding to an old idea. So if I were to say, Mary is rich, in addition, she has a big inheritance. In other words, instead of saying and all the time, you could say in addition. So when we use transition words, there are other ways of saying for and, but, or, nor. So yeah, so other ways of saying and other ways of saying but, instead of saying but, and, so. Those are the 3 conjunctions that I see in everybody's essay, in which people repeat all the time. I'm a nurse, so I work long hours, so I'm really tired, so I have very little time for homework, so I get low grades. So that particular student uses so a lot, and then but. My children are always noisy, but I get low wages, but. So when we use transition words, we find other ways of saying so, and we find other ways of saying and we find other ways of saying but to add variety to your paper. And so that is the main that's the main point of this entire lecture. It's different ways of saying so and but. And here we go on the transition words of saying so and but. So instead of saying and, you could say moreover, furthermore, also, to, as well as, besides, in addition, not only but also, in addition to this, additionally. So these are all different ways of saying and. Here are different ways of saying but. You have unlike, nevertheless, on the other hand. So Mary, unlike John, Mary is rich. John is rich, nevertheless, Mary is poor. So you get the idea. So you could show contrast instead of saying but. Instead of saying so, you can use all of these kind of words. So if I were to say, John washed his hair, no, Jan washed her hair, then she went to bed or something like that. So then you could say next or so and, following next, okay, for this order. So emphasis is also very similar to and. So instead of saying and, you would say undoubtedly, unquestionably, obviously, clearly, okay. So many different ways of saying your coordinating conjunctions. So when we write a comparison contrast essay, we are comparing the differences or the similarities of two topics. Transitional expression gives writing coherence. That is, they help you to move smoothly from one idea to the next. In addition, a variety of transition words adds interest to the essay. In this lesson, we will practice using transition words that will give your comparison contrast essay interest. Transition words allows the reader to follow your ideas or arguments from one point to the next. Examples of transition words include coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, and conjunctive adverbs. When we transition from one paragraph to another, we can use these transition words. And so here you could say first, cats are more, oh, and then when you write your essay, so here in paragraph 2, so here you have your thesis statement. Cats are better than dogs because cats are more independent, cats do not bark, and cats are easier to maintain. And so in your essays, you can write first, cats are more independent. Second, cats do not bark like dogs. Third, cats are easier to take care of. And finally, you would just repeat your thesis statement that cats are better than dogs for reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. And so as you transition from the last sentence of one paragraph to the first sentence of the next paragraph, you can use a transition word of similarity or a transition word of opposition. In the above example, I used a transition word of opposition. In the following section, I will talk about how you can use transition words in your essays. If you have questions about how to transition from one paragraph to the next, you can always email me. And here we go. So New Orleans attracts. So here you have many different ways to show similarity when two things are the same. So New Orleans attracts many tourists. In the same way, San Francisco attracts many tourists. New Orleans attracts many tourists similarly. So similarly, like, just like, likewise, in the same manner, by the same token. These are all ways of saying something is the same as. So New Orleans, or you could say New Orleans and San Francisco attract many tourists. So instead of saying and, you can use similarly, likewise, in the same manner. And then other ways of saying and is Ecuador. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas, and it is an exporter of oil. So another way of replacing and is you could say Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Furthermore, it is an exporter of oil. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Moreover, it is an exporter of oil. Likewise, in addition, also. So all of these are different ways of saying and. So different ways of saying but. I just went over this. So here we get to review it again. Mary is rich, but John is poor. Mary is rich, however, John is poor. Mary is rich in contrast, John is poor. In contrast to John, Mary is poor. Mary is rich, conversely, John is poor. Mary is rich, on the contrary, John is poor. On the one hand, Mary is rich, on the other hand, John is poor. Mary is rich, but on the other end of the spectrum, John is poor. Unlike Mary, who is rich, John is poor. Mary is rich, dissimilarly, John is poor. Mary's wealth differs from John's poverty. A clear difference between John and Mary is that Mary is rich while John is poor. Although Mary is rich, John is poor. Even though Mary is rich, John is poor. So Mary is rich while John is poor. Mary is rich, yet John is poor. So I want to see this kind of variety in your essays. And if I see this kind of variety in your essay, then I know that you've read through my week 8 lecture notes and I know that you've watched my Zoom lecture. If your essays still contain too many and, it, but, so, then I know you did not watch this video and you did not read the lecture notes. That's how I know that you've studied, is how much variety you're going to add to your comparison contrast essay. So do not keep handing in the same essay for each draft. So for each draft, you need to make corrections, and then you need to improve upon the draft. And that's how you learn better writing skills. Remember, Ernest Hemingway used to revise every chapter of his book 39 times. Yep, Ernest Hemingway. So if you've ever studied Ernest Hemingway in high school, then you know that if a professional like him has to revise and revise and revise, then so does he. That's the whole purpose of the writing process. And so here you have, unlike Mary, John is poor. Compared to Mary's wealth, John is very poor. Now, transition words can occur in simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. And so here are a few examples of transition words occurring in simple sentences. And so when you use a transition word, always use a comma after the transition word, especially if the transition word is in the beginning of the sentence. So all transition words, for example, similar to New Orleans, comma, San Francisco attracts many tourists. Just like New Orleans, simple, comma, San Francisco attracts many tourists. Here, these are all simple sentences. Different from Mary, John is poor. Compared to Mary, John is poor. Unlike Mary, John is poor. So all of this are different ways of saying but. You can say, unlike adulthood, childhood is filled with free fun time, and no responsibilities. In contrast to adulthood, childhood is filled with free fun time, and no responsibilities. Contrary to adulthood, childhood is filled with free time. So here you got three different ways: unlike, in contrast, and contrary to, instead of just saying childhood is better than adulthood, or instead of just saying as a child, or as an adult, okay? Or you can say in contrast to childhood, or in contrast to adulthood, childhood is free of responsibilities. So these are ways of saying opposition using simple sentences. And so here, use a comma, and also use a comma before fanboys. So every time you have and, but, for, nor, so, yet, you need to have a comma. So when I see your essays, I still see people forgetting to put commas in front of their fanboys. And so John is poor, but, and so you have to have a comma, Mary is rich. John is poor, comma, yet Mary is rich. Childhood is filled with free time, comma, yet adulthood is filled with responsibilities. The transitions in this group, so now you have transition words in compound sentences. So before, I gave you examples of transition words in simple sentences. A simple sentence is just a subject, a verb, and an object. When you have transition words in compound sentences, that's two sentences tied together by a conjunction, okay, so here you have one sentence and another sentence, and you have a conjunction. So that's why you have a conjunctive adverb, okay, same thing. And so here you have, and that's what makes a compound sentence. So compound sentence simply means two sentences, whereas when you have a simple sentence, it's just one sentence. In contrast to John, Mary is rich. And then here you have two different sentences. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. So that's one sentence. In addition, so instead of saying and, you can use a transition word of addition, comma, it is an exporter of oil. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Moreover, it is, and don't forget to put the comma after the transition word. And you have to put you can either put a period or a semicolon before the transition word. If I use a period, here I would say, Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas, big pause. In addition, it is an exporter of oil. If I use a semicolon is kind of like saying and, okay? It connects two sentences together, and the reader would read those two sentences really fast, as if it were one sentence. So the difference with a semicolon is that the whole sentence flows faster, whereas if you use a period, it puts a pause in between the sentences. So it's up to you as the writer to decide what your writing style. Do you want the reader to read it really fast? Then you use a semicolon, or do you want the reader to read it like a pause? Then you use a period. So you can use either a period or a semicolon before your transition word, but you always got to use a comma after the transition word. And so here I would read it as Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Moreover, it is an exporter of oil. So because you use the semicolon, then that means the two things flow together. And so in all of these are all different ways of saying similarity. Something is the same as something else in a compound sentence. Here you have difference, but in a compound sentence. So I already went over, however, in contrast, nevertheless, dissimilarly, conversely, on the other hand, on one hand, on the other hand. You got to use these you got to use together, okay? On the one hand, on the other hand, okay? Here you got to say, Mary is rich. This you use just like you would use but. You see, that's the beauty of it. All of these are different ways of saying but. So instead of saying but all the time, you have more variety. All right, and then you can have, you can also have complex sentence. A complex sentence is when you have a dependent clause put together with an independent clause. And so here, although Mary is rich, so here you have, although Mary is rich, so that's a dependent clause, but and a dependent clause cannot stand alone. It needs an independent clause to finish the thought. And when you put a dependent clause and an independent clause together as one sentence, you have a complex sentence. So here you have, although Mary is rich, John is poor. Mary is rich, yet John is poor. Because Mary is rich, John is poor. Even though Mary is rich, John is poor. Although Mary is rich, John is poor. Whereas Mary is rich, John is poor. And so when the dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence, you need a comma. So don't forget to put your commas at the beginning of the dependent clause. But if the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, you don't need a comma. So even though Mary is rich, John is poor. And then here you need the comma, and Mary is rich, no comma, whereas John is poor. John is poor even though Mary is rich. And so here are other transition you can, and then here when I have students, I have them practice transition using the transition words that we just practiced. So we could say, unlike cold weather, warm weather is, or in contrast to cold weather, warm weather is, or while cold weather is cold, warm weather is hot. So there are many different ways of saying cold weather, comparing cold weather to warm weather, rural living to city living, living in the home country or living in the US, dating online, unlike dating online, dating face-to-face is. So here are different ways of saying that. Now, different ways of saying if. So these transitional phrases present specific conditions or intentions. The transition words of cause are different ways to say if. John always knows where the emergency exits are to leave the building if there is a fire. So different ways of saying if would be in case of a fire, for the purpose of what to do in a fire, in the event there is a fire, on the condition there is a fire. So these are all different ways of saying, so John always knows where the emergency exits are to leave the building in the event that there is a fire. So as long as John knows where the emergency exits are. He will be able to safely exit the building when there is a fire. On the condition that there is a fire, it is important for John to know where the emergency exits are located. So here you have all these different ways of saying if, in case of, if, for the purpose of, in the event of, so as long as, in the hope that. So in the hope that John can safely exit the building, John needs to know where the emergency exits are located. And then different ways of saying, and here, these are known as transitional words of condition, cause, or purpose. Then you have transition words of examples, support, and emphasis. These transitional devices are used to introduce examples as support, to indicate importance, or as an illustration so that an idea is cued to the reader. Many people are not aware of the seriousness of COVID-19. For example, students at USC were caught having large parties, not wearing masks or social distancing. Many people are not aware of the seriousness of COVID-19. In other words, students at USC were caught having large parties. So here you have different ways to emphasize the next sentence. For example, in other words, to put it differently, as an illustration, to put it another way, for this reason, for instance, in fact, as a matter of fact. And all of these are different ways of saying and. Okay, so once again, these are also different ways of saying and. So many people are not aware of the seriousness of COVID-19, and students at USC were found having large parties. So instead of saying and, you could say, for example, in other words, to put it differently, as an illustration, to put it another way, for this reason, for instance, in fact, and as a matter of fact. Transition words of effect, consequence, and results. Some of these transition words, thus, then, accordingly, consequently, therefore, henceforth, are time words that are used to show that after a particular time, there was a consequence or an effect. So in other words, these are all different ways of saying so. Okay, so many people think COVID-19 is a hoax. Therefore, people do not wear masks and do not social distance in public, resulting in more COVID-19 outbreaks and deaths. As a result, under these circumstances, in that case, for this reason, then, consequently, hence, and accordingly. And so once again, these are all different ways of saying, so people do not wear masks. As a result, people do not wear masks. Under those conditions, so if I wanted to say, John never studies for his tests. As a result, he gets bad grades. John never studies for his tests, so he gets bad grades. John never studies for his tests. Under those circumstances, he never gets good grades. In that case, he doesn't get good grades. For that reason, he doesn't get good grades. So these are all different ways of saying so. So if I were to give the example here, John never studies for his tests, so he gets bad grades. And I could say, John John never studies for his tests. And then you could say, then, consequently, hence, accordingly, for that reason. Even I have to look it up, right? In this case, in that case. So those are many different ways, okay? So that you could have John never studies for his tests. Consequently, he gets bad grades. Hence, he gets bad grades. Accordingly, he gets bad grades. For that reason, he gets bad grades. In that case, he gets bad grades. So many different ways of saying, as a result, he gets bad grades. So many different ways of saying, so as a result, he gets bad grades. And moreover, he gets bad grades. And so the beauty of transition words is that you add variety to your paper, and you're not stuck saying the same thing over and over again. And so that you can always keep a transition word list by you, so that if you get stuck and you're thinking, what are other ways for me to say so? What are other ways for me to say and? Then you can look it up on your list. Transition word, just Google transition word list so that you could keep the list next to you. Eventually, you'll use those transition words so many times, it becomes a habit and you don't have to look at the list anymore. And what happens is that you improve your writing skills by having this mental list of transition words in your head. And that makes you a better writer over the next Joe who just writes so, and, but. Here you have transition words that you could use, transition words of conclusion, summary, or restatement. Now, for your conclusion paragraph, you have to restate the thesis as the first sentence of the last paragraph. And so in the conclusion paragraph or your last sentence of each paragraph, you can use transition words of conclusion, summary, and restatement. So you could say, to conclude, people need to take COVID-19 seriously. In the final analysis, gun control is not necessary because, so you always put the thesis statement, which is the first sentence of your last paragraph after these transition words of conclusion. In closing, to summarize, as can be seen above. And when someone says as can be seen above, they're talking about above as in the body paragraphs, because the reader would have just finished reading the body paragraphs. So as can be seen above, we talk about the preceding paragraphs. And then you could write, given these points, in the long run, as has been noted, and of course the old standby, in conclusion, gun control is not necessary, or abortion is immoral, or teachers should not have guns in their classrooms, or that sort of thing. And so when we write our conclusion paragraph, we want to inform the reader of the takeaway lessons that we can get from that essay. And then when you write your conclusion, you're summarizing the highlights of your essay. And in my week 12 lecture, I will go over different kinds of conclusion paragraphs. But for now, you're just doing something called a summary paragraph, okay? So in the summary paragraph, well, actually in any kind of conclusion paragraph, you can use these transition words of conclusion, summary, and restatement. And they can be used, also like therefore, in short. And then when you want to indicate time, you can use transition words of time, chronology, and sequence. So these transitional words have the function of limiting, restricting, and defining time. They can be used alone or as part of adverbial expressions. So today, everyone knows the seriousness of COVID-19. Now we have many vaccines for COVID-19. At the present time, we have 3 vaccines for COVID-19. From time to time, hoax cures appears for COVID-19. Sooner or later, we will have herd immunity. In due time, we will have everyone vaccinated. So all of this has to do with time, and we do not have a cure for monkeypox. If I wanted to update this, it's monkeypox. Okay, we do not have a cure for, actually there's a smallpox vaccine for monkeypox. So pretty soon we will have everybody vaccinated. And so many transition words in the time category, consequently, first, second, third, further, hence, henceforth, since, then, when, and whenever have other uses, except for the numbers, first, second, and third. They add a meaning of time in expressing conditions, qualifications, or reasons. The numbers are also used to add information or list examples. How can we use transition words to transition from one paragraph to another? And so remember that when we write a paragraph, the three parts of a paragraph are the topic sentence, supporting sentence, and conclusion sentence. And when we write our in-text citations, because you need to use in-text citations for essay 2, you use pie structure. So pie structure is going to P, main point, I, in-text citation, E, explanation of that in-text citation in 5 sentences. Then that very last sentence of your paragraph, in any kind of body paragraph, you transition to the next paragraph, because when you have the concluding sentence, you're always transitioning to tell to the reader what's the next paragraph is going to be about. All right, so here you have an example. So you can use pie structure for your essay 2 when you stick in your in-text citation. So when you write an APA in-text citation, use only one APA in-text citation at a time. And so here, when you have a direct quote, you would write the author, the date, and the page number. A direct quote, and you have quotation marks. A direct quote is when you cite word per word exactly what the author says. And then when you have a paraphrase quote, then you just write the author name and the date. And a paraphrase quote is when you summarize it in your own words. So here's an example of pie structure. First, smoking causes lung cancer. So the thesis statement is smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer. So that's going to be your thesis. So the topic sentence is the main point. It's the first sentence taken from your thesis statement. That's your topic sentence. Then you have I for in-text citation. So you have your one in-text citation. 70% of smokers who started smoking young end up dying of lung cancer. So that becomes author, date, page number. Then you write 5 sentences about that in-text citation. That's E for explanation. So after I write my in-text citation, I would write, Dr. Smith explained that as a teenager, a person starts smoking due to peer pressure. A person has a high chance of dying of lung cancer if you start smoking, if a person starts smoking early. Dr. Smith claims that the majority of lung cancer deaths can be avoided if people do not start smoking or if people can quit smoking. If someone offers a cigarette, politely refuse them. In addition, lung cancer, and now I am transitioning. See this, I'm in the last sentence of my paragraph. And in the last sentence of my paragraph, I'm now transitioning to the next paragraph. So in addition to lung cancer, you can also get throat cancer. Then you start with your next paragraph. Second, besides lung cancer, smoking causes throat cancer. And so try not to repeat yourself. You just have to restate. Basically, the last sentence of the previous paragraph, you're just restating the topic sentence of the next paragraph, if that makes sense. So that makes for easy transition and flow. And so that's how you would write your thesis statement, not your thesis. That's how you would write your transition to the next paragraph. So second, besides lung cancer, smoking causes throat cancer. Throat cancer is a common ailment found among heavy smokers. And so here you have the author name, the date, and the page number. Dr. Smith claims that throat cancer is prevalent among heavy smokers because the nicotine in the smoke damages the throat muscles. So Betty ended up with throat cancer. Smoking destroyed her, and you can also use case studies too to fill your paragraph. Remember, you have the P for the main point, I is the in-text citation, E is the 5 explanation of that in-text citation in 5 sentences. And when you write those 5 sentences, you can use a case study. So here I use Betty ended up with throat cancer. Smoking destroyed her throat so badly that to breathe, she now has to breathe through a tube. Dr. Smith treats patients like Betty all the time. And Dr. Smith warned young people not to take up smoking, and he warned adults to quit smoking as soon as possible. Finally, the last kind of cancer a person could get from smoking is stomach cancer. And so here in the last sentence, in the conclusion sentence, I'm transitioning over into my next paragraph. Third, the most serious kind of cancer, stomach cancer, is that smoking causes is stomach cancer, which is caused by excessive smoking. And so you can have the most serious effect last. And another thing that you notice is I used here, I used first, I used second, and I used third. So you can use first, second, and third in between your body paragraphs in order to have better essay coherence. And then when you are writing your conclusion, you would write in closing, in conclusion, all in all, in short, smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer, in which you restate your thesis and then you summarize the main ideas of your essay, and then you're done. That's it. So that would be your 5-paragraph essay. And also another mistake that people are making is that they're only writing the web address in the reference set, in the references. So in your references, you need to put in the last name of the author's first name, the date, then you put in the name of the article in italicized, then the name of the publication, then the date that you retrieved the publication, and then the web address. Now, if you're having trouble with APA, you're not sure of your reference citations, you can always look it up on www.apa.org, or you can always email me and you can cut and paste your reference citation to ask me if you're doing it right. And usually if you're using a library, they actually have a reference citation button that you can push that will automatically give you the reference citation. So here, and I'm going to go over more about APA reference citations in my week 10 lecture when I go over the difference between credible sources, different credible sources, a direct quote, and paraphrase quote. And so I want you to become aware of APA now so that for your week 10 assignment won't come as such a surprise. Okay, and then for your week 9 persuasive essay, you're going to write a persuasive essay post where you're going to convince the reader of your point of view. So in a persuasive, and this is totally different from your essay 2. Remember, your essay 2 is week 7, week 8, week 11, and 12, and week 9 and 10 are totally different. And so in week 9, you're going to write a totally different essay in which you're going to write a different essay on a totally different topic in which you got to convince me of your point of view. So that's basically, and it can be anything, could be controversial, you know, as long as you back it up with APA and with reasons, you're good to go. And you can even use counter arguments. That is, you point out what the other person says, and then you rebut it with your argument. So you can use a counter argument paragraph if you want in order to strengthen your argument. So here is how your persuasive essay structure will look like. So in the introduction, you're going to have a hook, a background information, definition, and thesis. Then body paragraph, you're going to have topic, sentence, evidence, and analysis. And in the conclusion, you're going to tie up the essay, establish the significance of why we all read the essay. And so here, this is how it looks. Thesis, then topic and evidence, topic and evidence, and topic and evidence. So this is going to be your persuasive essay structure. So here are some examples from previous students. So parents should spend more time with their children. In these generations where most mothers are engaged in full-time employment, supplementing their family income, children from a tender age are left in the care of babysitters. And so you don't have to, italicize this. Okay, you don't have to italicize. I only italicized it for teaching reasons. So here I wanted to show you have the thesis statement, and then you have your topic sentence that matches your thesis statement, so that each topic sentence matches the thesis statement. And you got to make sure that you have your in-text citation, which is your author, the date, and the page number. And we always use an in-text citation if we're going to cite something like numbers, medical facts, any kind of uncommon knowledge, then we cite the source. If you're not sure, cite the source. Okay, so here you would use, and this person actually had a pretty good essay because his thesis statement matched his topic sentences. So good role models are very beneficial and an important part of life. Positive models in the lives of children are not only beneficial, but very important too. And so here, let's see. Oh, children should spend more time with their parents because parents are good role models. Parents provide positive reinforcements, and parents teach good morals. And so here, first is talking about this whole paragraph. We'll talk about good role models. Then this whole paragraph will talk about positive reinforcements. And here you have good morals. And so just like I did with at the very beginning, when we did the week 8, remember I did the fruits are better than vegetables because of the cost, the nutrition, and the taste. And then the body paragraph was cost, nutrition, and taste. Well, that's the same thing in the persuasive essay also. And in many ways, your comparison contrast essay is a persuasive essay. But I want you to choose a different topic. But I'm just saying that the different styles that I introduce in this class, they overlap. So comparison contrast essay just doesn't compare two things. It can also be a persuasive essay. So here's an example of how you would do your references. And this person also, here's another way in which, so the average American spends $1,200 a month on prescription drugs. And if a person has cancer, that cost can go up to $10,000. Then you have to put in the author's name, the date, and the page number. So whenever you use numbers of any kind, whether it be statistics, dollars and cents, dates, any kind of number, you have to put in where you got that number from, because somebody spent a lot of time doing that research and you want to give that researcher credit for coming up with that number. If you don't use an in-text citation and you don't give that researcher credit, then you are committing plagiarism. So you want to avoid plagiarism by putting in your in-text citations. And so here, any kind of medical facts, you also need an in-text citation. So medical facts, scientific facts, numerical facts, all need and historical facts, all need in-text citations. So you can say, according to Dr. Smith, 80% of people get obese, and then you write in the date. Or according to Dr. Smith, 2020, 80% of Americans are obese. And so you want to put in the author's name and the date, and you want to have a signal phrase. In other words, according to signal to the reader that you are about to have an in-text citation in your paper. That's why it's called a signal phrase. So if you Google signal phrases, you can get yourself a list of signal phrase verbs. So instead of constantly saying, Dr. Smith says, Dr. Smith says, you could say Dr. Smith states, Dr. Smith expresses, Dr. Smith agrees, Dr. Smith disagrees. So those are all known as signal phrase verbs. In other words, it signals to the reader that you're about to put an APA in-text citation in. Why do we use these in-text citations? It gives credibility to your paper. It signals to the reader, you didn't just make this up off the top of your head. This isn't just your imagination. So that adds ethos to your paper. Remember, in order to have a good argument, you have to have ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos means the appeal to credibility. It means that your paper was written by experts. Pathos means appeal to emotion. That means that you use good descriptive language to appeal to the reader and hook him into your essay, and then appeal to logic, logos. That is, you have a thesis statement, no grammar mistakes, and you have reasons that match your thesis. Therefore, and when you have all three appeals, then you don't have a fallacy. If you're missing just one of the appeals, then you have a fallacy. So I will be talking a lot more about fallacies, ethos, pathos, and logos in my week 10 lecture. But for now, you just have to make sure that your persuasive post for week 9 has ethos, pathos, and logos. And you can even analyze when you post to 2 students, you can analyze, John, your paper has ethos, pathos, and logos. I can tell that your paper has ethos because you cited a scientist, and it has pathos because you used a lot of descriptive language, and it's got logos because you have a thesis statement with supporting sentences. So when you post to 2 students, not only can you do the peer review of analyzing to see if that post has good essay structure, you can also analyze that post to see if it's a valid argument. Because if John is missing just one of the appeals, then you could tell John, well, John, you're missing the your essay lacks good essay structure, so that therefore it's a fallacy, and you need to rewrite your post to talk about one main idea. So you can analyze other people's posts by having ethos, pathos, and logos for your week 9 forum. So that's another way, instead of just doing the peer review from week 3. So you have 2 options for that, either ethos, pathos, logos, or you can, and then if you want to know what can I write about, you can go to the procon.org for debatable topics. And so here are some examples of debatable topics that you've got economic, education, you've got ethics, you've got government and, politics, you've got health, you've got history, science, sports, technology. In other words, there's something for everybody. Okay, and so, and now I'm going to go over, now I'm done with my week 8 instructor session. And so next week, which is going to be I can't believe week 9. Next week, I'm going to go over 3 kinds of persuasive essays. And you have 3 kinds, and I will go over how to use a counter argument paragraph and rebuttal paragraph to avoid bias in your paper so that you can have a fair and balanced paper, which makes your post more credible for the reader. To avoid bias, we have to tell both sides of an issue. We can strengthen our argument by adding what the other point of view is in the counter argument paragraph. Then we rebut or respond to the other side by arguing our side of the argument. When we add the other side to our argument, this helps us avoid bias and cherry-picking fallacy. A fallacy is an illogical argument. Cherry-picking fallacy means you cherry-pick only certain facts for your essay while ignoring the other side, thus creating a bias. So I'm going to go over what is bias, what is a fallacy, and what is cherry-picking in next week's essay. And then I'm going to go over 3 kinds of persuasive essays for next week's lecture. So the first kind of persuasive essay is the position paper, where you take a position on an issue. So either you're for abortion or for gun control or against abortion or against gun control. You can't, in your thesis statement, you cannot say, oh, I'm both for and against gun control, or both of them have their pros and cons. So in a persuasive paper, because you're trying to persuade me of your point of view, you have to take a side. So therefore, the first kind of persuasive essay is a position paper. You take a position. The second kind of persuasive essay is a call to action persuasive essay, where you want the reader to do something. So let's say you describe in your essay the some kind of social injustice. Then call to action. In the conclusion paragraph, you want the reader to get up and do something, pass legislation or attend a protest or to call your senator. Okay, so that is called a call to action persuasive paper. And a call to action persuasive paper is very similar to the third kind of persuasive paper, which is a problem solution, where you describe the problem and then you find a solution. So very, very similar. The number 2 and number 3 kinds of persuasive essays are very, very similar, because in both of them, you're describing some kind of problem and then you're trying to find some kind of solution. So I will go into more detail about the 3 kinds of persuasive essays in next week's, and in the week 10 lecture, I will go over in detail how to avoid fallacies by having credible sources. I will tell you different kinds of non-credible sources and how to avoid non-credible sources from creeping up in your paper so that you can write a credible, professional sounding paper. I will go over in a lot more detail how damaging bias is to our papers. A fun topic for discussion in the week 10 lecture is the prevalence of media bias. And so I want you to start thinking about a topic for your week 9 post. So the week 9 post is totally different from your comparison contrast paper. And you can go to the procon.org for topics for your week 9 paper. And so if you have any questions about any of this, if this was like way too much, you can always email me, and then I could set up a time and we can do a whiteboard, one-on-one Zoom session, whiteboarding, and we can write your paper together. Or if you're having trouble with your week 9 post, we can do the week 9 post together. And so that pretty much wraps up. That pretty much wraps up my week 8 instructor session. And I hope to see you all in the week 9 persuasive essay, in which that's going to be a PowerPoint. I don't know if that attracts anybody. So I'm going to go over how to use a counter argument, paragraph, how to put in a rebuttal paragraph, what is a fallacy. I'm going to go over ethos, pathos, logos, and I'm going to go over the 3 kinds of persuasive essays. And of course, the most famous person to write a persuasive call to action is obviously Martin Luther King, when he did his I Have a Dream speech, his call to action to end racism. So I hope that you enjoyed today's lecture on transition words and how you can use transition words to avoid using and, but, for, nor, so, yet. And so instead of saying and, but, you can use transition words of opposition, transition words of addition, transition words of consequence, transition words of chronology, and transition words of summary. And of course, for your comparison contrast papers, transition words of opposition. Yeah. And so I'll be able to tell if you've watched this video and studied my lecture notes by reading your essays and seeing if you have a sentence variety using these very same transition words. So I know that you've been paying attention to my lectures, and you get better grades for it too. So I'll see you next week in the week 9. And week 9, in your persuasive post, I could tell you're reading my lecture notes as if you put in persuasive essay, put it in counter argument and rebuttal. And if you do ethos, pathos, logos in your post to 2 students. So that's how I can tell that you've watched the video to the very end. Anyway, so see you all next week. And we only have 4 more weeks left. After this lecture, only 3 more lectures left, and you're done with this class. So congratulations on making it this far in this class. Not many people have finished this class this far. So congratulations on finishing this class up until now. And so I'll see you all next week.